So like I said before, I was able to walk to the venue, and I got in, found a very good seat right away, and I was able to get up close to the stage, as he does characteristically in his sermons, which is something he gets from his father, I think, calling everyone forward to the stage and having them accept Jesus Christ into their hearts. So that was kind of neat to be part of. And, you know, I didn't see that many foreigners. I saw one of my housemates. She was there helping people in. But, you know, apart from her, you know, I didn't see anyone from the States or from Canada out there that I could tell anyway. I guess I wasn't so much focused on the crowd, but it just seemed like the people around me. Couple of women were eating some really delicious thing. I don't know what it was. It was some flatbread sandwich thing with meat in it, and I just got the smell of it, and I made no indication of wanting it, but they handed me one, which was great, because I was hungry. But it would have been nice to speak to someone in English out there. I mean, I'm really not learning Vietnamese that quickly, but my mind is quite divided right now. I'm such a big crybaby. Anyway, though the experience did not give me quite the Satori moment that I hoped for, you know, and I thought that I could go back and, you know, even at one point I was thinking of getting rid of some of the Buddhist icons and imagery that I have in my room, thinking, well, I should probably get rid of this Eastern religion stuff that I'm into, because maybe there is such a thing as just following one single path, and that's the only way to do it. But before my head got all tangled up in all of those issues, and before it became more of a personal struggle with trying to resolve, you know, my feelings of universalism with what I believe to be true, what I believe to be false, before I got into all of that, I was just mostly just happy there for the political experience, or this being the first Republican that I've seen, really, as someone who's been to a lot of political stuff in the past. You know, I've personally met Ralph Nader and Russ Feingold, and these are very important liberals where I'm from. Liberals, leftists. And I went to see Howard Dean, and I shook John Edwards' hand during the 2004 election. First one I voted for. I didn't see John Kerry, though, but I did end up voting for him, which I regretted. The only time I voted for a president, actually. And in addition to that, I remember seeing Al Gore when he came to Madison in 2000. That was the first political rally I went to right before he lost that election. Who knows how history would have turned up if he had won. If he had been in place during September 11, that would have been a different story. But thinking of all these possibilities really gets us nowhere. It was just wonderful to see, like, this was sort of a commitment of my life, not to the exclusive evangelical Jesus and all of the questions that brings up, as in, well, do I get baptized as an adult, for example, or does my infant baptism in the Church of England, does that still count? Even though my parents didn't raise me as a Christian. I mean, it's very hard to consider all those things. But politically, it was good to see a conservative speaker, someone that I could really understand and accept. And there's a beautiful simplicity to his message, and it's also just rooted in Scripture, and it's very old-timey, just what you would expect from him, just like his father, Billy Graham, you know. The icon of the American preacher. It was an American celebrity, and spreading the good word, talking about all these Jesus-y principles, like, well, you have to, rich men do not enter heaven, and whatnot. His story is interesting, though. Going back and looking at his other sermons, he talks about how, of course, being the son of Billy Graham, I mean, he was raised to believe all that stuff. But I guess Billy Graham, being from a Protestant background, I would guess, you know, there's a belief that at some point you have to really actually decide. It's not enough just to believe. That with the evangelical brand of Christianity, it has to show a huge transformation in your life, which is, in the end, it boils down to what basically every religion says. In my studies around the world, I can tell you, the Buddhists are saying the same thing. The Muslims in Saudi are saying the same thing. It has to be a complete transformation. It has to be a giving up of things, you know. Or as Stefan Molyneux put it in this brilliant call he had with a woman who was raising her daughter and worried about how her daughter's going to end up as a teenager. Like, he's this idea that you have to pick up virtue, and virtue is kind of like a glowing hot sword in the jungle that you need to use to cut around all the branches and everything around you. Jungle, woods, whatever. I think everything's a jungle out here, of course, because I'm in jungle territory. But picking up that sword and picking up that way and taking up virtue in your life is incredibly painful, and it requires you to give up a lot of things, and it requires the destruction of all that specialness, all that ego. So that's the real truth. I mean, it's difficult to talk about God in any specific terms, especially when you've seen so many ways of worship and of respecting and thinking about God. But it's quite easy to talk about responsibility. And I've been thinking about this today. I think it's like the great paradox of universalism, meaning that any way can get you there, in my belief, but you have to be completely purified by that way. The way has to be kind of like a crucible, because the ultimate truth for God to exist at all, I think, it has to be a universal God, a God that tries to reach out to everyone, and that anyone can appeal to and reach out to, regardless if they call that God Jehovah or Allah or whatever. But we're going to get into some tricky territory here, because I do have some specific thoughts about Islam, because I think the current form of Islam, I don't think that, and I think that it's got a very violent streak to it, and I think that it's more than just the current form. I think it goes back to the fact that their holy book says to wipe out a race, specifically, you know. It's not the love your enemies of Jesus. It's not the regard others as yourself of the Diamond Sutra in Buddhism. It's a bit of a different thing. But I'd say, like, I'm universalist in the sense that I believe in the love your enemies stuff. But it would be, you know, you have a hard time convincing me that if you do not invoke the name specifically of Jesus, that excludes you. However, I am glad that Jesus is spreading here, and it makes me very happy. And it's good to see my country's religion and my country's politics taking hold out here in Vietnam. And that really follows the money. That's the golden rule. The real golden rule, for those of you who don't know, is that the one with the gold makes the rules. Praise Jesus, and thank you, Franklin Graham, for coming. And that's one of the, I could list 100 things I love about Vietnam, but one of them is just the plurality of religions here. And you see this in China to some extent, in South Korea, but even in Japan, I guess, they don't have Christians, really. they have Catholics and Jehovah's Witnesses, but it's such a minuscule part of their population. And China, you had the problem of communism wiping everything out, and the Cultural Revolution, and of course that's the same in North Korea, where they installed their own religion slash government. Basically, if you make the state the god, it becomes the religion. Of course, you can't say that about all of communism, because here I am sitting in a communist country, which had a lot of religious influence even before Franklin Graham. And in fact, the Communist Party here has long ties to both Buddhism and, well, not affiliations so much, but ties with the Catholic Church as well. just look at the life of Ho Chi Minh, who studied with French priests when he was young, and then later on stayed at Buddhist temples in China. Time and again, though, one of the great discouragements that I have in my study of world religions is that each one seems to say, this is the only path. But it kind of reminds me of what my mentor, the artist Mark Horton, once told me long ago. He said, you can be anything, but you can't be everything. In the end, you have to soldier on in one specific path, and that's the virtue of choice. That's inward volition, you know, that's taking control. Whether you find yourself meditating for hours under a Bodhi tree, or praying and calling it prayer instead, having different thoughts in your head, but really accomplishing the same thing, and working towards the same virtue, and building the same superego that helps you escape from yourself and feel yourself as part of a more connected, more loving human race. Conquering the loneliness that I think is inherent in everyone, which I do project quite a bit, I guess. Franklin Graham said, you know, before I really gave myself to Jesus, I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. Which makes me think of two things. First is that Ozzy Osbourne song. What was the name of it? I think I Just Want You, maybe? But it's in an Ozzy Osbourne song. And it's also in the Tao Te Ching. And the Tao Te Ching, for those of you who don't know, was created by a fictional character, or I guess a gathering of fictional folk poets in China, scattered throughout China, who had heard rumors of Sakyamuni, that is Siddhartha Gautama, that is the original Buddha. They had heard rumors of him, and that became the Chinese folk religion before Bodhidharma brought in Buddhism from India. And in spite of fables about Confucius, who was a real man, meaning Lao Tzu, which, you know, again, is a collection of people, and even the name Lao Tzu just means the old wise one. So that's a crash course in Eastern religion right there. But again, I guess it doesn't really matter if Lao Tzu was real any more than it would matter if Jesus is real, if we're going to get into those technicals. Some heretical thoughts, maybe. So in a way, I guess, like, again, to sound universalist, if the message is the same, does it really matter where it's coming from? We're the Taoists who practice Wu Wei, which is sitting quietly doing nothing, really accomplishing anything different from what the Buddhists were doing in dhyana. Hard to say. I mean, it became its own thing, which is Zen, but in the end, you're just sitting around quietly doing nothing. It's like a meeting for worship for the Quakers. It's universalist in that sense, maybe. Anyway, we'll get you there, but you just have to really strive to be on that way, and to change this golden rule from the one with the gold making the rules to one where you honestly treat others how you want to be treated, and you honestly feel love and compassion for people around you, which is easy to say, but it's incredibly difficult to do. Anyway, I'll collect my thoughts and I'll talk about this some more later.